Okay, we are live.
Thank you. I'm just going to remind everyone to mute unless you're talking. Sandra, I think you're. Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Chair Gwen Whistler, and I'd like to welcome you to the June 13th Planning and Economic Development Committee meeting. All council members and staff are participating virtually. To help our audience to follow along, I'll state each section of the agenda aloud. We're streaming live on our virtual engagement hub, which is accessible through the option for the public to listen. Which is accessible through the virtual engagement hub link on the front page of the city's website. We also have an option for the public to listen live by phone by dialing 855-925-2801 and entering the code 8187. For those of you out there with us today, welcome. For today's meeting, we have the option for people to call in and comment live during the meeting. To call in and comment live, use the same number, 855-925-2801, meeting code 8187. Your phone will be muted and you will hear the meeting live. At this point, callers will hear, for more options, please press star. Pressing star 3 will allow callers to continue to listen live and join a speaker queue. If you're watching the meeting through the live stream while you are listening to the meeting by phone, please be sure to turn down the volume on your device before speaking. So I'm going to go through a roll call. If you just say a quick hello, and again, just remind you to mute your phone when you're not speaking. Councilwoman Sandra Kilgore.
Hello.
Thank you. Councilwoman Sage Turner.
Good afternoon.
Assistant City Manager Rachel Wood.
Good afternoon.
I'm getting a little bit of a delay. I don't know about other people, but Planning and Urban Design Director Todd Okolachaney. I don't think he's on here. Sorry about that. Downtown Planning Manager Dana Frankel.
Hello.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and start the agenda. The first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes. Can I get a motion to approve the May minutes?
This is Sage. I'll move.
This is Sandra. I'll second.
Great. Okay, now I'll go through a roll call to get, if you agree, say aye. Otherwise, say no. So Councilwoman Kilgore?
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Great. Okay, so the minutes have been approved. So the only item on our agenda is an update on the AVL Shares Space initiatives. And this is for discussion only. We're just getting an update here, so there won't be a vote. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dana Frankel. Go for it, Dana.
Great, thank you. And we'll pull the presentation up. Thank you. Good afternoon, council members. My name's Dana Frankel. I'm in the Urban Design and Place Strategies Division of the Planning Department. And I'm here today to provide updates on the AVL Shares Space initiatives that we launched 2 years ago, early on during COVID. And the last time you heard an update on these programs was in November of 2021 as part of a manager's report. So we can move on to the next slide. Thank you. So in this presentation, I'll briefly review the program elements that we're referring to with this program. I'll provide status updates on each, talk about some of the challenges that we are having in running these programs and in transitioning them long-term, talk about some of the community engagement we're doing as well as next steps. Next slide, please. And to start with key takeaways, so we're continuing to take an incremental and initiative-specific approach to transitioning components of this program long-term. We have an interdepartmental team that is continuing to work on this together. These programs were and continue to be popular and we've gotten very positive feedback pretty much all along the way. However, there are ongoing challenges and resource needs, and no new funding has been allocated to support these programs as they're currently operating or transitioning to long-term. Existing programs that enable private uses to utilize public space could be improved, which we'll talk a little bit about. And we're continuing to engage with the community on next steps. And next slide, please. I wanted to revisit these guiding principles and goals that we established at the beginning of the program, and really just to highlight this one goal, which was to consider long-term implementation of successful tools and strategies. I do think, again, we've gotten positive feedback and we've been able to achieve a lot of the things that we set out to do. And now we're in this time of trying to consider what could or should be continued longer term and how to do that. Next slide, please. So as a reminder, when we talk about AVL Shares Space, we're actually talking about a number of different initiatives. Today, I'm going to be focusing on allowing businesses to expand onto private property, on public sidewalks, and into on-street parking spaces. The initiatives overall were intended to support small businesses during the pandemic and to enable them to align with public health guidelines. So just to touch on the ones that I won't be going into more detail on, our shared streets and pedestrian priority zones. We initiated this on several key corridors downtown, beginning with the block on South Market Street, where we opened up parking spaces to be utilized by adjacent businesses and organizations. We also did that in South Slope, portion of College Street, portion of Church Street, and on Wall Street. In all of these areas, except for Wall Street, businesses and organizations have not wanted to continue along those lines. And so we have transitioned where there are some continued uses of on-street parking. We've transitioned that over to the Parklet program. On Wall Street, however, there was agreement to continue a similar configuration. So we're supporting the businesses and that setup there. 10-minute curbside pickup zones. These were installed downtown and on Haywood Road in West Asheville. Those are still in place, although our parking services staff is engaging with businesses in these areas to understand how each of these spaces are being used and if we could remove some and return them back to metered parking. We may have rolled out more than were needed or than at least are needed at this point in time. And equity markets, this was an initiative. It was a collaboration between the Business Inclusion Office and Special Events Office, where we sponsored BIPOC businesses and entrepreneurs to vend at existing outdoor special events. That ran through 2021, but has discontinued primarily due to staff limitations and capacity. So moving on, next slide, please. And just to quickly revisit the participation that we've had, we had about half of the businesses that utilize these programs were actually on private property. So this is typically parking lots on commercial corridors like Merriman Avenue and Haywood Road. We had 48 participating businesses, 27 businesses utilizing public sidewalks, and at one point, 28 utilizing on-street parking spaces, which has primarily been downtown. We did survey participating businesses at a couple points, generally got really positive feedback. A lot of folks, especially in the beginning of the rollout in 2020, were able to hire or rehire staff to support the additional customers they were able to accommodate. A large majority indicated positive and very positive feedback to their bottom line. And in our recent survey to them in September 2021, over 75% of respondents were definitely interested in continuing, even if that meant additional fees and upgrades to their space. And in a public survey that we administered in September 2021, again, positive feedback pretty much across the board for each initiative, the most support being for the Parklet program and the use of private lots long term. Next slide, please. So utilization of private property. This program ended January 3rd, 2022, and our plan for transitioning long term has been and continues to be to work with businesses one-on-one to find an existing path to permanency through our existing permitting processes. So it is a bit of a challenge because our development services staff is working one-on-one with these folks. You know, first it's getting the word out to let them know you really need to let us know what your intentions are, what you'd like to see longer term, and then for us to consider every site is unique. You know, the parking requirements on different sites are unique. And so we have been doing the best we can to follow up with folks and to coordinate. And we have engaged with just over half of participating businesses, so about 50%. And many businesses are not pursuing long-term use of these spaces, but we're just going to continue along these lines. Of course, it's a learning opportunity for us also to consider possible changes in the future. And next slide, please. Use of public sidewalks. So when we initially rolled this out, it followed our existing outdoor dining guidelines, although we made it very quick and we did not charge fees. This program, the temporary program, also ended January 3rd, 2022. So similarly, we have been following up with businesses to ask them to apply for permits. It takes some staff time to do this one-on-one engagement and to follow up. And in working through this program and this transition, I think it's help us see that our outdoor dining process could really use some improvements. Standards could be updated and our fees could be updated. So although we aren't making changes immediately, we are working towards some updates in 2023 on this. And next slide, please. And use of on-street parking spaces, which we've called temporary parklets. This allowed businesses and organizations to utilize adjacent on-street parking. Typically, we have seen this downtown. We have 19 businesses still utilizing parklets. In 2021, in September, we stopped taking new applications. This program is especially staff intensive in terms of the review process and in terms of managing these spaces and ensuring they remain compliant and safe. And as we move forward, and we recognize there's a lot of support, we're likely looking at splitting the program into two tracks, a public parklet program as well as a streetery program. That is typically the use that we're seeing now, is that these spaces are being commercialized by restaurants. And however, it is a bit complicated to develop the long-term program, and we're not ready to roll out a new program now. We also would like to consider the standards as they relate to our existing dining program on sidewalks. And so we're working on considering various aspects of that to roll out in the future. So we had last extended the program for existing parklets to remain through July 5th, which is coming up. And we are planning to notify folks that they may keep their existing parklets out through the end of the year. And the goal is to make progress towards a long-term program between now and then. And next slide, please. So I wanted to bring up, I think this is representative of some of the questions that we're discussing internally and discussing with the community, both about how we might make some updates to the sidewalk dining program, as well as what some of the standards might be for our parklet program. So we had a work session between the Downtown Commission and Multimodal Transportation Commission in December. We did some quick polling pulled a couple of these questions out. So currently on sidewalks, we require 6 feet clear space. Is that enough? About half of the folks that responded said it depends on conditions. So are there some things we could be updating and looking at in our standards? Should outdoor dining, should the fees be based in part on the amount of space being used? We do this to some extent, but to a very limited extent. So could we be looking at things like how much square footage is being used? Should parking spaces be able to be privatized for dining? Yes, if fees are appropriate. So getting those fees right is going to be really important. Should permitting standards encourage businesses to remove items from the sidewalk when the business is closed? This particular group felt, a majority of folks said yes, which is something that we don't require now in our permitting. So it's something to consider. And maybe I won't read each of these. Oh, should parklets and streeteries be open to the public when the business is closed? The majority of folks said yes. So again, just representative of the types of things that we're thinking about as we move forward in these longer term programs. And next step, please. Or next slide, please. Also in terms of engagement, so we had that work session in December. In February, we rebooted the Downtown Commission's Public Space Management Task Force. That group had done a lot of work in 2018 and 19, a lot of public engagement to understand how various uses of public space impact folks' experiences downtown and how we might work towards some improved management strategies. It really is a continuation of some of the recommendations of the Downtown Master Plan, which all of the management strategies have not been implemented. So trying to build on that and create this framework that can help staff be better informed about how we run programs in public space. So this group, following our meeting with Multimodal, we now have 3 seats on this task force with Multimodal Commission representatives, as well as many other representatives that interact with public space downtown. And so we're having this group review this management framework that was developed based on the input process we had in 2018 and 19. They're going to help us prioritize some focus areas to work on in the next 1 to 2 years. There's going to be some overlap with this work that we're doing to transition the AVL Shares Space program. So just want to make you all aware that we do have this group that we're happy to have that's able to provide feedback along the way as we consider changes. And next slide, please. So in terms of next steps, we are working towards a revamped outdoor dining program as well as new parklet standards. We're looking at rollout in 2023, along with a new proposed fee structure and identification of new resources, including staffing. One of the things we've realized as we've dug into this is that we could use some more capacity when it comes to managing the programs that we already have in place. So we're going to continue to seek input from the public and from this Downtown Public Space Management Committee. And between now and when we're ready to roll out these long-term programs, we're doing our best to manage expectations. We want to be able to support a lot of this long-term, but it's complicated. Developing new programs for public space, requires, we want to get it right. And then working one-on-one with businesses just takes time. And next slide, please. So yep, again, revisiting our key takeaways, taking an incremental approach. These temporary initiatives have been popular and successful, continuing to work with an interdepartmental team. There are challenges and resource needs certainly along the way, and developing long-term programs takes time, and anticipate some new programs and requests in 2023 And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Councilwomen, do you have questions? Sage, looks like.
I do. Thank you, Dana. And maybe I didn't hear this in the update, but so it sounded like we have stopped taking new applications, but are you still getting regular calls for them? I mean, is there a demand?
That's a good question. So we've stopped taking new applications for the parklets. We've received 2 requests since we stopped taking applications in September.
And have you looked at those 2 requests? Is there any reason to not look at them since there's so few?
We've told them that we weren't taking new applications. We had a parklet review team that was meeting weekly that had representatives from every department. We wanted to stick with what we've communicated out, but it's a fair question. I'd have to look back at those particular cases, and we'd have to change, what we've communicated if we were to support those.
Do you, I mean, not to, the people, so I noticed there was a situation where 75% of the people were really happy. Were there specific issues that were coming up with the people who didn't like the program that you identified?
We actually didn't get a lot, if any, negative feedback. There were some concerns that were COVID specific. So like if you have seating on both sides of the sidewalk, maybe that feels a little bit unsafe. I think staff has recognized that there's some areas that could use improvement in terms of just maintaining some of the elements that had initially been improved and just keeping an eye on things. And of course, furniture moves, and we want to, absolutely prioritize accessibility. And so some of that, I think we really haven't gotten specific negative feedback.
Sage?
So one of the things that you mentioned that struck me was, repurposing the spaces again for meter space. And I know we've been having this ongoing conversation about parking's enterprise fund not having enough money and using rescue dollars to cover some of its losses. But I'm trying to remember from our parking committee of the Downtown Commission, I don't know if this number is completely accurate, and I wonder if you do. It used to be that a metered space earned about $2,700 a year. Does that sound right to you? I'm trying to remember if that's right, but I'm just trying to see what the loss, what would we actually gain from what I would consider a step back from kind of active street scene and community activity. And it's almost like a safety thing too. Like we say, apartments create safety in neighborhoods and commercial districts because there's always eyes on the street. When you see people sitting outside and enjoying themselves, it's a different level as well. So I don't want us to conflate the value as if it's some huge value that these need to be returned to the meter spaces, but maybe we could learn what that number is, which is
$22 per day, I believe. And it's a really good point that I think applies to both the curbside pickup as well as the parklets. I'll just note, I meant to mention this, but one of the things we've noticed with the current conditions of the parklets is that probably about half are not utilized regularly at this point. So I
feel that way too about the curbside pickups. Yeah, I feel like they're empty a lot. But $22 a day is what a meter space can make. Doesn't always mean it makes that. And we don't do 7 days a week and so on. If there's a way, Ken should have that number. I wonder if you could find out. If we're going to try and evaluate if these spaces should be returned to revenue sources, then I would just like to know what that value is, because I imagine it's bringing more revenue to the businesses, which is helping them with staffing and so on, than it is to our meter fund.
And one question, Dana, what are you hearing other cities are doing?
Good question. I was just on the phone earlier today with the city of Greensboro, and I would say we've made more progress than them even. We've had more businesses participate than
Not a surprise, Dana.
Other comparable cities. A lot of, I would say, and we've done research at different points, and we're trying to keep up with what other cities are doing, but a lot of cities are in a really similar place as us. Some of them have gone ahead and discontinued their temporary programs and, and may not be developing long-term programs, or they're just focusing on that. And we've tried to keep ours rolling. But I would say for the most part, those cities that have rolled out temporary initiatives are somewhere in the in-between stage, similarly with us.
Sandra, do you have any?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Hi, Dana. Thank you very much for this information. The one thing I wanted to ask you was this: is it something that we actually? I mean, is it just a seasonal something that we could just do seasonal, and that way it doesn't really, impact as much parking or the, So, I was just wondering, is that what we're looking at? Just temporary, or seasonal, or as far as these particular parklets being used?
I know I've seen some establish like heaters and stuff and do plastic wraps, and like I'm picturing the one across from my office that's the Wicked Weed did like this church tent thing. So some people are doing it differently, which speaks to that equity. I like the idea of the seasonal though. I wonder, was that ever asked of the users?
So that's a really good question. I think that's something that probably could make a lot of sense, particularly for use of private properties. Our current temporary use permit allows structures for 180 days at a time. So within our current ability, we could likely support, and Ben's on the call so he can correct me if I'm wrong, but more of that use on a seasonal basis. In terms of parklets, I think it's a really good question for us to ask of the businesses. For some of the parklets, I'd say some of the better structures that we have that are flush with the sidewalk, that, look nice, meet all the standards, there significant investment goes into that. But it doesn't mean, there's going that route or there's going a more temporary route. And I think there's trade-offs of each, but I think it's a really good question that we could get some more feedback on from folks who are participating.
There's also, I'm sorry.
There's also just kind of changing out. So if it's a parking space during half the year and then it's a parklet and then it becomes a loading zone, there is some like operational requirements there, not to say that couldn't happen or wouldn't happen, but it's a consideration. But yeah, I think it's a really good question.
Any other questions, councilwomen? Okay. Thanks, Dana. Appreciate it. Appreciate your keeping up with this. And the next item is public comment. So callers will have 3 minutes to comment. At the end of the 3 minutes, staff will ask you to wrap up your comment. Do we have anyone in the speaker queue?
Nope, no one's in the speaker queue.
For those millions of people who are interested in this, I'm sorry. Okay, well then I will go ahead and close the public comment and adjourn the meeting. See you all tomorrow.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.